Yes, guys, welcome back to flatcapeurotalk here, and we are going to be talking about NICOLÒ Zaniolo, the Roma and Italian player. And I feel like this could be actually an interesting one because Paratici, as we know, has taken a flight over to Italy, and it's not a vacation. It's actually to seal the deal potentially of Joe Rodon over to Roma, potentially linking back up with Jose Mourinho, and Brian Hill being linked supposedly with Sampdoria, despite the Marseille sort of connection. But let's see what maybe Zaniolo could bring to Spurs and maybe how he could compare to other creative midfielders. He is a huge talent, I must say, and hasn't really maybe met that sort of potential that a lot of people probably predicted a few years ago. I feel like he's sort of in that Martin Odegaard kind of, role where he's still exceptionally young, but I feel like we've known about him for quite a long time, despite how young he is. This last season in the 2021 22 season in the Serie A, he had 28 matches played and only 2 goals and 1 assist, actually. And he played close to 2,000 minutes as well. But in the Conference League, it's really where he actually had a great season. In 10 matches, he actually had 5 goals and 3 assists there. Born in Massa, Italy, which I believe is kind of a coastal city to the west and kind of northern Italy. He's actually not a Roma kid through and through. I actually mistakenly thought he was. He is 22 years old, but I think he is turning 23 quite soon. And also in terms of his position, it's very strange. Like, is he a right winger? Is he a cam? Is he a number 10? I feel like he can play through the middle as well as play out wide, but which one is his best position? I'm actually not sure. So do let me know in the comments. He stands actually quite tall at 1.9 meters, 6 foot 3 inches, left-footed, as we probably know. Fiorentina and Inter Milan were his youth clubs. Also Genoa at one stage as well. So he kind of passed along through all the big clubs over in the Serie A, at least for his youth career. And then his market value stands at around 29.7 million pounds, and his contract is up in two seasons in 2024. I feel like when it comes to maybe the bid that we probably would imagine sending in, I think it's something around the 45 million pound mark is supposedly what Roma would be willing to accept. I think it's going to be well above maybe market rate for what maybe Roma would be willing to accept to part ways with Zaniolo, because they have taken their time with him, and he is someone that, again, is still so young, and they probably would be quite foolish maybe to let go of him for a fee that they probably wouldn't see as maybe more than acceptable compared to all cams and wingers across Europe's top 5 leagues. He actually looks pretty good in some metrics, and then in other areas it's hard to know whether it's kind of Zaniolo's fault or potentially it's the Jose sort of system that he's in. So do let me know about that. But shot creating actions, I mean, he's okay with 3.7 there. He only ranks in kind of, I think, what is that then? The 31st percentile when it comes to that sort of metric. So not really that great when compared to other wingers and sort of cams across Europe's top 5 leagues. When it comes to through balls, though, he is actually in the top 11th percentile there. Key passes, which is a pass that leads directly to a shot on goal, which you would think is maybe a really important sort of stat when it comes to the positions Zaniola plays. It's not very high there. And again, he's kind of in the 80th percentile when it comes to that metric. So that is kind of a bit scary. Shots total, he's actually very high with over 3 shots per game. And that actually puts him in the top 7th percentile of all players in that sort of position to have over 3 shots a game. Progressive passes, not very high there. Maybe that's because he actually receives the ball, I think, a lot more. I think his progressive passes received are actually very high, whereas actual progressive passes played, not so high. And then fouls drawn, he is someone that I would say is quite aggressive in the way that he takes on players and the way that he tries to carry the ball upfield. He does kind of get a lot of people, pulling on his kit and, trying to drag him down and whatnot. So he does get a lot of fouls drawn, which is something that could be actually quite useful when we are trying to progress the ball forward. He'd be very useful in terms of, just being a good ball carrier in the midfield. When we kind of compare him to other creative midfielders in Premier League, you kind of get some interesting sort of comparisons. I decided to just compare him to Premier League creative midfielders instead of just kind of picking at random, maybe creative midfielders that Spurs have been linked with, because it's really not so, I don't know, it's just not very concrete as to who really Spurs are looking at. I didn't really want to compare players across multiple leagues. So I decided to just take a bunch of creative midfielders from the Premier League and compare them to Zaniolo. Zaniolo, I must say, takes more shots than most number 10s in Europe. So he's going to continue to lead in that. But Christian Eriksen having a very good time at Brentford when it came to, being able to create for his teammates. I mean, over 3 key passes, which again is a pass that leads directly to a shot on goal. So Eriksen is kind of destroying him, I would say, at least on that metric. And then through balls, though, I mean, Zaniolo actually quite high. And then shot creating actions, though, which is, any sort of kind of action that leads to sort of a chance created. Ericsson is just a lot better than Zaniolo in that regard as well. Players dribble past those. Zaniolo is exceptional and carries into the penalty area. He's also quite exceptional there. I really do like Zaniolo's dribbling ability, perhaps probably his best sort of attribute, if you do ask me. If you kind of look at him versus Odegaard, a similar story maybe to kind of what the stats were compared to Ericsson, but maybe you can take maybe some pride in the fact that, his dribbling stats, again, are really, really high in comparison to most players. And also, I mean, he's not too far behind in terms of, maybe the shot creating actions when it comes to Odegaard, whereas Ericsson was, I believe, over 5 shot creating actions a game. He's only about a half a shot creating actions behind Odegaard, who's considered probably the main creator in that Arsenal team. So maybe his shot creating actions aren't as poor as probably they looked. I would say they were pretty unimpressive at the end of the day, though. But again, the dribbling is very high because his dribbling is so good that he's able to even kind of make Smith Rowe look maybe not even as good on the ball, at least in that regard, because, beating him with, with through balls, he's beating him with shot creating actions. He's beating him with carries into the penalty area, players dribble past. Actually, very impressive for Zaniolo with how he sort of compares to a really young talent of a similar sort of age bracket, kind of like Smith Rowe there. Passes into the penalty area, they're kind of close to each other. Key passes, they're pretty close to each other. And then shots, he's much higher. So when you really look at it, he actually is close to almost beating Emil Smith Rowe in all of those metrics. And Emil Smith Rowe did score 10 goals last season. That must be said as well. Bruno Fernandes kind of actually gets sort of destroyed by the Portuguese player. Bruno Fernandes is probably one of the best players, I think, in Europe when it comes to, being able to, create for his teammates. Even after a poor season, he still was, I think, at least when it came to underlying numbers, one of the best players in Europe when it comes to creating for his teammates. So I think in terms of any sort of creative numbers like, passing or, through balls or, shot creating actions, Bruno's going to destroy most players, and he really is going to destroy Zaniolo, who at the end of the day, with some of those metrics like shot creating actions and passes into the penalty area, he didn't really rank too high compared to most, other number 10s in Europe. So you have to maybe take that into consideration with Zaniolo, that some of his stats are actually not so impressive, whereas others, of course, are very impressive. But what type of player are we really getting in that position? I think what we're really getting is essentially a guy that is a very, very good dribbler, a very good ball carrier, very strong, very powerful. And maybe that's something that we kind of need in that midfield, just someone who kind of can work a lot harder than maybe a Gio or an Ndombele did, but then kind of have that, that dribbling and that power and that, kind of carrying that sort of like an Ndombele did. But hopefully nowhere near as many problems on the other side like Tanguy brought us. But again, shots, he's actually higher than Bruno Fernandes there, which is, again, quite interesting. Perhaps Zaniolo could be maybe that fourth, fifth goal scorer for Spurs that we're kind of looking for. He doesn't really have any seasons that you can really point towards that he really blew up or anything. Maybe this most recent Conference League display was a good sign for what the guy could produce, maybe when in kind of a European competition, or maybe it's just he's finally getting in, to maybe his own body or, starting to figure himself out, a bit more with how his game sort of plays. A big concern, though, and I know everybody's going to address this, are those big 2 ACL injuries. And I'm not even sure if they were on both legs or on one leg. I'm not sure which one is worse, but he does have some major injury concerns to be worried about as well. But everybody, do let me know what you think of NICOLÒ Zaniolo. I feel like, again, someone that we're actually probably been aware of for quite some time, but, hasn't exactly blown up at any stage and, has sort of simmered, under the radar, as sort of one of those players that is yet to sort of meet his potential. But yeah, let me know what you think. Hit that like button on your way out. Feel free to drop a super thanks if you do enjoy the content. But as always, we'll be seeing you.